One of these 9 stars is sitting in the secret square. The contestant who picks it first could win a trip for 2 to Japan. Which star is it? Vincent Price, Rose Marie, Maury Amsterdam, Wally Cox, Charlie Weaver, Florence Henderson, Milton Berle, Ethel Merman, or Paul Lynde, all in the Hollywood Squares. And now, here is the master of the Hollywood Squares, Peter Marshall. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Hollywood Squares. Hello, stars. Hi, Peter. Hello, everybody. I'm Mr. Wildcat. Hope you all had a wonderful vacation. Mr. Wildcat's back from vacation, that is. Hope you all having a wonderful summer. We've had a bunch of new subscribers to the channel since our last time we've met, so welcome aboard, all you new viewers. You will not be disappointed. Today we are paying tribute to the wonderful game show legend Peter Marshall, best known for the long-running game show Hollywood Squares, which he hosted for 15 years. Okay, something that is hardly heard about. Well, it is heard of in today's age, but not back then. It wasn't. Okay. So today we are we're going to be doing 2 things at once. We're going to be paying tribute to Peter Marshall, plus we're also going to be looking back at the Hollywood Squares as a whole. So buckle up, and we're about to get into action, shall we? So basically, Peter Marshall, he was born on March 30th, 1926, in Clarksburg, West Virginia. Peter Marshall was a stage name. His actual name was Ralph Pierre Lecoq. He used Peter Marshall as a stage name, and he passed away not long ago on August 15th, 2024, at the age of 98. So he was basically American game show host, television and radio personality, singer, and actor. He was the original host of Hollywood Squares from 1966 to 1981 and had almost 50 television, movie, and Broadway credits. He was born to Ralph and Jean Lecoq in Clarksburg, West Virginia. His father, Ralph, committed suicide in the mid-30s when Peter was 10 years old. He wound up moving to New York City to be with his mother, who was a costume designer. Graduated from high school, and then was drafted into the U.S. Army in 1944, where he was stationed in Italy. He was originally in the artillery, but was recruited to be a disc jockey at a radio station in Naples. He was discharged in 1946 with the rank of staff sergeant. He has an older sister named Joan, who became the television and film actress known as Joanne Drew. Joanne Drew was born January 31st, 1922, died September 10th, 1996, at the age of 74. She is best known for her roles in such films as Red River, She Wore a Yellow Ribbon, and All the King's Men. Okay. Now, basically, Peter Marshall's early careers, he's best known for his comedy act with Tommy Noonan. He wound up appearing in nightclubs, on television variety shows, and in films including Starlift, The Rookie, and Swing Along. He also, one of his variety shows that he wound up appearing on was The Ed Sullivan Show. We don't know exactly when he appeared on there, but in 1995, Peter Marshall was one of 5 game show hosts who appeared on an episode of The Donahue Show when they were looking back at the careers of. They were doing a game show special. They interviewed the 5 legendary game show hosts. They had Peter Marshall, they had Gene Rayburn, they had Wink Martindale, Tom Kennedy. Those 4 were on the set. And then you had Monty Hall, who was on a television monitor coming to you by satellite from California. Okay, he wasn't able to make it out to New York for the TV show, but he wanted to be there with the group. So that's why he was sitting there on the television screen. We'll talk about that more later on. But basically, in the mid-60s, they decided, Merrill Heater and Bob Quigley decided to produce a new game show called Hollywood Squares, which is basically a celebrity version of tic-tac-toe. You pick a celebrity, the host reads you the question, and it's up to the contestant to decide whether they are giving the correct answer or making one up. That's how you get the square. And basically you do it by saying, like, I agree or I disagree. And if you correctly agree or disagree with the celebrity, you get the square. If you don't, then the square automatically goes to your opponent. The only time that the square does not go to the other opponent is if it would give your opponent an automatic win. They had to actually earn it. It's not given. Victories are not automatically given. You have to earn them. Okay. So basically, they did a couple of pilots. They wound up. Let's see. They wound up doing a couple of pilots. First with Bert Parks, who is best known for the Miss America pageant, and Sandy Barron, who is best known for appearing, who played Jack Klompus on the TV show Seinfeld. Okay. Bert Parks, they weren't too thrilled with him. Okay. NBC was looking for a complete non-entity. Barron was considered too New Yorky. Okay, didn't think he would catch on the rest of the country. So they wind up coming across to Peter Marshall. They remembered him from his comedy routine with Marshall and Noonan. Okay, and basically he did an audition, and then he was offered the job. Peter Marshall didn't actually agree to it first, but only took it when he found out that the other person in the running for the job was Dan Rowan. Yep, the same one behind Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In. Da 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 da. And now, folks, it's Suck It To Me time. No! Okay. Anyway, Peter Marshall and Dan Rowan, apparently these two did not get along together, or at least Peter Marshall did not get along with Dan Rowan. Rowan was known for stealing Marshall and Noonan's comedy routines when the two of them were together, and he was passing them off as his own material. In addition to that, Noonan was on his deathbed in the mid-60s, around the same time Hollywood Squares was getting ready to get up and running, and everybody came to pay him a visit or something like that. Dan Rowan never had any sympathy or any respect. Okay? Yeah. So, and Marshall hated Rowan ever since. Okay. Meanwhile, Dick Martin was complete opposite. He actually had full respect for Peter Marshall and Tommy Noonan, and he actually did show respect. But Dan Rowan, on the other hand, what an asshole. I can say that about a few other people too, but that's a discussion for another program. Anyway, Marshall accepted the job because he wanted to screw Dan Rowan out of a job. He wanted to screw Dan Rowan out of a job. That's the only reason why he accepted the Hollywood Squares gig. Hey, this is only going to last 13 weeks, and I'm not going to go back to Broadway. At least I got to screw Dan Rowan out of a job. How about that? Only for him to not knowingly that the Hollywood Squares would become so popular that he would wind up on the show a total of 15 years. Yep, 15 years. Okay. So, first show with Hollywood Squares debuted on October 17th, 1966. Basically, with the addition of Hollywood Squares, it was the final addition to the short-lived game show Powerhouse block on NBC, which for the next 2 years included Concentration with Hugh Downs, Jeopardy with Art Fleming, You Don't Say with Tom Kennedy, Let's Make a Deal with Monty Hall, Match Game with Gene Rayburn, amongst many others. And the sad part is, most of those shows, they don't exist anymore. Okay, most of those episodes don't exist anymore. Okay, we'll talk about that later on. During most of the daytime run, NBC broadcast the Hollywood Squares at 11:30 a.m. Eastern, 10:30 a.m. Central. They apparently were they followed Jeopardy with Art Fleming for the longest time. Okay. And in 1976, they began to move the show around, and in 1980, the show basically fell apart. But we'll get to there in just a moment. Okay, so after the daytime version it picked up the ground, and it got up and running. The show became popular enough to inspire NBC to produce a primetime version, which aired from January 12th to September 13th, 1968, as a mid-season replacement for the short-lived sitcom Accidental Family. A nighttime syndicated program ran from November 1st, 1971 through May 22nd, 1981. Initially airing once weekly, the syndicated squares added a second airing in 1972, and in 1980, the show wound up airing 5 nights a week. Okay. So let's see if I can. Okay. So basically, syndication program first came to be around 1971 when the U.S. FCC passed the Primetime Access Rule and Financial Interest in Syndication Rules. It prevented networks from programming one particular hour of primetime programming on its television stations each night and required the stations to spin off their syndication arms as independent companies. Although the intent of the rule was to encourage local stations to produce their own programs for this time slot, budgetary limits instead prompted stations to buy syndicated programs to fill the slots. This, coupled with an increase of UHF independent stations, caused a boom in the syndication market. In the 1970s, first-run syndication continued to be an odd mix: cheaply produced but not always poor quality filler programming. These include dance music shows such as Soul Train, 20th Century Fox's That's Hollywood, a television variety of the popular That's Entertainment theatrically released collections of film clips from the Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer Library. Game shows thrived in syndication throughout the decade as well. Nightly versions of What's My Line, Truth or Consequences, Beat the Clock, and To Tell the Truth premiered in the late 1960s and found loyal audiences for many years. Okay. Several daytime network games began producing once-a-week nighttime versions for broadcast in early evening hours, usually with bigger prizes and often featuring different hosts. MCs were limited to appearing on one network and one syndicated game simultaneously, and modified titles such as Match Game PM, the $100,000 Name That Tune, or $25,000 Pyramid. Few independent game shows such as Sports Challenge and Celebrity Bowling also entered syndication market around this time. Of these shows, Let's Make a Deal and Hollywood Squares were the first to jump to twice-a-week syndicated versions in 1973. Another popular daytime show to have a weekly syndicated program was The Price is Right, which began concurrently in weekly syndication and on CBS. Dennis James hosted the nighttime version for the first 5 years, after which daytime host Bob Barker took over for another 3 years of weekly episodes, even though by this point the daytime and nighttime shows had diverged noticeably. The nighttime version of Family Feud in 1977 quickly jumped from once weekly to twice, and finally to 5-day-a-week airings, and its massive popularity, along with that of 5-day-a-week entries such as Jack Barry's The Joker's Wild and Tic-Tac-Doe, the move of Match Game's daily run from CBS syndication, and Chuck Barris' increasingly raunchy remarks of his 60s game shows such as The Newlywed Game and The Dating Game, brought an end to an era of once-a-week games. Also popular in syndication in daytime was The Gone Show, hosted by Barris, and throughout most of its run, Gary Owens hosted the first syndicated series. Now, the reason why I mention that is because you see Hollywood Square. It shows you like how Hollywood Squares was able to enter syndication and why they wind up and how they were able to expand. Okay, that's going to be very important as we talk more about Hollywood Squares. Okay, so a couple facts about the original Hollywood Squares. Okay, basically back in the day, the object was basically to get as many A-star celebrities that you can get on the show. Problem was, the pay sucked. They did not have a very good budget. They were only offering celebrities minimum wage at the time, which was $750 for every 5 episodes. They taped 5 episodes in a single day, okay, for the daytime network run, okay? And when they appeared on that 1 week's worth of shows, they were paid $750. combined for all 5 episodes, which comes out to about $150. Okay, a lot of money back then, but okay, but still, okay, may not really a lot of money compared to what other celebrities were making for other stuff. But Hollywood Squares found a way around that. Okay, see, back in this mid to late '60s, there wasn't as many talk shows or programs where stars can go on to promote their work. So Hollywood Squares allowed them to come. They allowed the celebrities to come on the show to promote what they were doing. For example, they had Roger Moore come on. Roger Moore, back in the '70s, was James Bond. All right, you had like Sean Connery or Roger Moore. They would come onto the show as, to promote their upcoming James Bond film. Okay, Roger Moore is going to be appearing in a James Bond film, Live and Let Die, hitting theaters on XX date. Okay, or if you had like a TV, you had a TV star, they were going to appear in a new TV show coming up, or a musician, they had a new song coming out, or a new album, or they're going to be appearing in concert, or better yet, a comedian that was going to be going on tour doing comedy work, like in Las Vegas, for example. Joan Rivers doing comedy work in Las Vegas on this specific dates. Please sure to catch her. Okay. Hollywood Squares was very highly rated. It reached out to a whole bunch of, uh, it reached out to millions of households, and it was literally free publicity. All right. You get the minimum wage, but in return you get to promote your product, and in return you get millions of people to either go see your film, watch your TV show, attend your comedy routine, or or if you're promoting a book or something, you would have people going out and buying your book just because they promoted it on the Hollywood Squares. Okay, that's basically how they were able to get a lot of people to appear on these shows. Okay, so you had a couple people that were like permanent. They were like permanent squares on the show. You had like Rose Marie, Charlie Weaver, who was actually Cliff Arquette, but played a character named Charlie Weaver. You had Wally Cox, and then eventually you would have a, they eventually decided to develop the Prize Center Square, which they eventually decided to go with Paul Lynde. These were your permanent cast members on the show. And then you wind up having a whole bunch of other people that would be like rotating. You have people that would appear frequently, quite often. You would have others that would appear every once in a while. Okay, the list goes on, but I can give you a couple of people. I can give a small list of people: Joan Rivers, John Davidson, Damon Wilson, who was on Sanford and Son. I think you had Red Fox, who probably appeared in there as well. You had George Gobel, um, Florence Henderson. You had Marty Allen. Um, Give me a moment. Let me see if I can. Okay. Abby Dalton was another one. I should have. It just spun my mind. We just saw the E True Hollywood Story on the Hollywood Squares not long ago, and I completely forgot Abby Dalton was on there. Uh, you had like a list of people, so let's go through. Okay. Eddie Albert, he was from Green Acres. Steve Allen, Maury Amsterdam was on there. Paul Anka. Um, Got to be careful here because you have is everybody all together here? You got Milton Berle, Joey Bishop. Let's see who else. Sonny Bono, Burt Reynolds, Mel Brooks. You had Dick Cavett. You had Linda Carter. Carol Channing. Oh, that was a good one. To those of you who write in saying there isn't enough censorship on television, we're pleased to announce that this year, Lassie will be wearing a bra. Carol Channing on Ronan Martin's Laugh-In. Okay. You also had Charo, that Hispanic lady who was mostly famous for showing off, flashing her boobs. Okay. Margaret Cho. You had Dick Clark. Um, the list goes on and on and on. Okay. Um, Phyllis Diller, Barbara Eden, um, Buddy Hackett. Okay. Artie Artie Johnson. Wow, I'm surprised. My luck, since Marshall and Rowan never got along together, I am so surprised that they had somebody from Rowan Martin's Laugh-In on the show. Okay. Let's see. Dave Martin. And Jake Meadows. The list goes on and on and on. Okay, so these are people that appeared on the show quite often. Okay, and the one thing that really made the Hollywood Squares mostly famous was the zingers. Okay, celebrities were not given the answers in advance, but they were consulted by writers or people on the show saying, "You're going to probably have a question that will involve this or this, and this could be an answer that you can come. Okay, here's something you can say for a possible zinger." Okay, and they had some really good ones. Okay, so all right, so let's take a look at some of the popular zingers. Okay, let's see. Oh, Don Rickles was on there too. Okay, all right, so let's see. Peter asking Paul Lynn, is Billy Graham considered a good dresser? Nah, but he's a terrific end table. Okay. Peter asking Don Rickles, is there a Mrs. Engelbert Humperdinck? Well, I've heard about that in the Navy once. I had that on my hand. If there is, there's a new ointment that'll make it go away. Okay. Paul asking Paul Lynn, President Nixon recently told Time magazine that he doesn't have something in the bedrooms of any places he lives. What doesn't he have in the bedroom? Fun. That's a good one. Peter asking Paul, how many men on a hockey team? About half. Oh, here's okay. Peter asking Marty Allen, say Marty, you're from Pittsburgh, right? Yeah, Pittsburgh. What does a person from Philadelphia dunk his pretzel in? A girl from New Jersey. Okay. Peter asking Florence Henderson, according to Sports Illustrated, will humming help your tennis game? It struck me funny. Well, humming help my tennis game? Sure, why not? It takes your mind off your balls or something. You know, I was in high school when I first saw the Peter Marshall Hollywood Squares, and so many of these zingers they appeared on around the same time. NBC and Fox they came out with these TV specials of the most outrageous game show moments of all time, and many of these zingers wind up popping on on these game show specials. And guess what? Oh my God! Well, one of my classes in high school, accounting to be exact, okay, the teacher asked if we could bring in, if we had like videos of like TV shows that we could bring in and they could show for periods while we're taking the final exam. They want to take like a 5 minute break or something. Pop in the video. I'm not knowing the jokes. I brought in the most outrageous game show moments. And by the time we get to Florence Henderson saying, "Sure, why not? It takes your mind off your balls or something." At that point, I realized, oh shit, that's what she meant. That's why it's crazy. Oh, that was a joke. Oh my god. Eventually, the teacher pulled it up. And she stopped the tape and gave it back to me. Says, "I can't show this." Let's do a couple letters. Let's see. Peter asking Buddy Hackett, "Say, Buddy, what country has the highest ratio of doctors to population?" "The country with the most Jews. I would say Israel. There's a doctor in every family. It could be a father, maybe an uncle, a couple of specialists." "All agree." "You agree with that?" "It's Israel." "It is?" "I only said Israel because I thought the answer was Sweden, but I couldn't come up with a joke for that." Okay. Peter asking Paul, when Henry Kissinger went to a geisha house, when Henry Kissinger recently visited Japan, he went to a geisha house. Now, how did he spend his time in the geisha house? "Oh, negotiating for peace." Peter asking Charlie Weaver, how many balls would you expect to find on a billiard table? "How many guys are playing?" And probably the craziest one of them all. Hey, Peter asking Paul, "Hey, Paul, what's the best reason for pounding meat?" "Oh, loneliness." "Hey, you said pounding meat." "Oh, shut up." Anyway, pretty crazy stuff. Okay, so this stuff lasted for about. Let's see if there's anything else here that's good. Peter asking Rosemarie, Abraham Lincoln did something special on January 1st, 1863. What did he do? "He signed Vincent Price's autograph book." "Oh, that's mean." Okay. Peter asking Paul, does Mark Spitz believe swimming in the nude will make you go faster? "Well, it's easier to steer." Yeah, of course it's easy to steer without a light swimsuit on your around your private parts. Oh, here's another good one. This is right in front of me. I have to read this. Peter asking Rosemarie, according to the Pittsburgh Press, is the Loch Ness Monster interested in sex? "Peter, that's where I draw the line." Okay, we need to get the hell out of here before I start getting into inappropriate stuff I should not be doing, even though I've probably already done that. Okay, so anyway, this is what Hollywood Squares was all about, and it wound up airing for about. This one aired on NBC Daytime for about 14 years. It came just shy of beating the record for concentration, which was on the air for 15 years. Okay, basically, so. And then you had the syndicated version during the 1970s. And then you also had the show started to change during at various points throughout the 70s. Like you had Wally Cox, who died in 1973, and Charlie Weaver died in 1974. So two of the regulars unfortunately passed away during the show's run, which was very tragic and sad. But the show has to move on. So, of course, they did, and by 1980, the show started to fall apart. During the late 70s, they started to move the show around due to different time slots. And then in 1980, new ownership had taken over. The network was pretty much broke. And the reason why is because NBC had invested in they invested in some very expensive um, projects that unfortunately did not deliver anywhere good anywhere to good ratings. Okay, the ratings were not there to support the money that they spent on the projects, and they wound up losing a lot of money on them. The biggest deal breaker of all was the 1980 Summer Olympics in Moscow, which NBC had spent over $300 million to get the television rights to. They unfortunately were not able to televise the Olympics because our piece of shit president, Jimmy Carter, who for some reason is still alive today and will be turning 100 years old in less than 40 days from when we are shooting this video, he thought it was such a good idea to boycott the 1980 Summer Games in response to the Soviet Union's invasion of Afghanistan. He gets up on the podium during the State of the Union address saying, if Soviet troops do not pull back out of Afghanistan, then I am going to suggest the United States does not send a Olympic team to the Summer Olympics. Okay? And that was a huge insult. Like, not only did NBC lose a lot of money and nearly put them into bankruptcy as a direct result, but you also had hundreds of athletes who had trained their whole lives for this particular event. Many of them only get to go just one time, and they're not allowed to go because of some stupid feud with the Soviet Union. Okay? That was real. Boycotting the games, even though there were 65 other countries that followed suit with us, that was a very stupid thing for you to do, Jimmy Carter. Okay? And might I add, the only reason they elected him in the first place was because people were so pissed off. It was in 1976, they were still pissed off with Watergate. Okay? But that's a conversation for another day. NBC was in the brink of bankruptcy. They could no longer afford these high production programs. And even though Hollywood Squares even though they never paid high prices and stuff, like Peter Marshall and Paul Lynde were the only two that actually had, they were actually given a worthy salary. And the only reason they gave Paul Lynde a worthy salary was because it was the only way to keep him on the air. Ratings started to drop without him on there. They had to find a way to get him back on. And then the ratings started to pick up, but unfortunately the ratings were not as good as they were during the early part of the show's run. And around the same time, new ownership had taken over, and they were wanting to offer a then unknown, at the time, host. Okay, they wanted to give some unknown at the time comedian named David Letterman, whom hardly anybody has ever heard of at that particular time, his own daytime talk show on NBC Daytime. And they wanted to make this program last 90 minutes. But in order for Letterman's show to fit on the network, NBC had to chop off some game shows from their lineup. They decided to pull the axe on Hollywood Squares. They also decided to pull the axe on High Rollers, which was hosted by Alex Trebek, and Wheel of Fortune, which at the time, which had been on the air for 5 years, hosted by Chuck Woolery. Okay, so those three are on the chopping block, and the Hollywood Squares. So they started to count down the remaining shows, and at the last minute, Letterman's daytime talk show got pushed back from 90 minutes down to just 60 minutes. NBC Daytime was able to spare Wheel of Fortune as a result, but Hollywood Squares was out. So that marked the end of Hollywood Squares' run on NBC Daytime. So that was about 3,536 programs. The final episode aired on June 20th, 1980. Okay. During the daytime version's run, it was basically a 2 out of 3, best 2 out of 3. For first contestant to get a tic-tac-toe up and down, up across and diagonally, they won that game. You got $200 for the first, okay, for each game that you won. First to win 2 won the match. Originally, it was $100 for each game that you won, but if you won the match, you won an additional $300. So you get the $200 for each game that you won, plus the $300 for the match title, for a total of $500. And then originally you were allowed to play up to 5 games. Okay, 5 match champion retired with additional $2,500 in cash, the secret square prize package if it had not yet been won, a new car, and the cash bonus. The cash bonus wound up increasing throughout the years. As we approached the late 70s, 5-day champion got additional cash, which was either $5,000 or $10,000, a new car, and a luxury vacation, with the total value of somewhere between $20,000 to $25,000. They also added a end game in 1976 to the daytime version, where you picked a celebrity, and inside each one had an envelope, and whatever was in the envelope of the star you picked, that was your bonus prize that you automatically won. So basically, the top prize was $5,000, and you had other prizes on there ranging from, okay, you had other cash values, plus you also had small kitchen appliances, to other items worth up to about $2,000 each. Okay. The 1968 nighttime version had $300 a game. Syndication was $250 a game. Okay. The difference between the daytime and the primetime / syndicated versions is that the nighttime and syndication versions, they kept the 2 contestants were on that show for the whole half hour, and you kept playing as many games as possible until the show came to an end. Okay, whereas the NBC daytime, it was just 2 out of 3. So, and then on the whoever finished with the higher score at the end of the nighttime or syndicated episodes, they were given anywhere from a car to they were usually given a car, and then in later shows they were given like a prize or something. Okay. When the original Hollywood Squares when the daytime version ended in 1980, the show was evicted from NBC's Burbank studios, and they decided to move the show up to the Riviera Hotel and Casino up in Las Vegas, Nevada. The syndicated version for the final season was 5 episodes a week, as I mentioned earlier in the rant about syndication. Games were no longer scored, but instead the winner of each game won a prize, and if time ran out before a game could be completed, the prize went to the player with the most squares on the board. Additionally, 8 of the season's the top 8 winners from that season were invited back at the end to play in a grand championship tournament where $100,000 was awarded, and it was won by Eric Lloyd Scott of Denver, Colorado. Other prizes included a geodesic dome home from Domes America, a Botany 500 wardrobe, 50-day cruise on Delta Lines cruises, for first Apple II computer system, original Sony Betamax, a camp trailer, a motorhome, and $20,000 in cash. Okay. See other stars. See any other stars that we forgot about on the Peter Marshall version? Kay Ballard. You had Buddy Hackett, Marty Allen, Waylon Flowers, and Madame. Barbara Eden. Weird Al Yankovic. How the hell did he appear on that early ones? Is beyond me. Charo. Sandy Duncan. I forgot about her. Jonathan Winters, Foster Brooks, the Lennon Sisters, Garrett Morris, Karen Valentine, and of course you had John Davis and Joan Rivers. Okay. Paul Lynde was featured in the technically important center square throughout most of the show's original run. In 1968, after 2 years on the show, Lynde became the original center square. Lynde's outrageous jokes earned him 3 Daytime Emmy Award nominations in 72, 73, and 74. He left the show after the August 1979 and was replaced by Waylon Flowers in the center square. Lynn would return to the show when for the final syndicated season in Las Vegas. Okay, and like I said, it was not because of people thought that Paul Lynn left the show because he had a drug and alcohol problem, which he in somewhat did, but it was mainly because of financial reasons. Okay, so that marked in 1980. By the end of the 81 season, Hollywood Squares was officially done, and the first chapter was officially closed. Shortly after, in a couple months after the syndicated Hollywood Squares came to an end, Paul Lynn unfortunately passed away from cardiac arrest in his bed. So let's talk about. He was born June 13th, 1926, died January 10th, 1982, at the age of 55. So it was about a couple months. Let's see. Here we go, right here. Paul Lynn had failed to attend a birthday celebration, so his friend and actor model Paul Bursey became concerned. He and Dean Dittman, another friend, they could not get an answer from calling Lynn on the phone or knocking on the door, so they broke into the side entrance. They found Lynn dead in his bed in the early morning hours of January 11th, in which Lynn was 55 years old. Stories circulated suggesting that Lynn had a visitor at the time of his death who fled the scene, but evidence indicated that the stories were false. Lynn regularly activated his house alarm before retiring for the evening. When Bursey broke in, the alarm blared, indicating that Lynn had been alone at the time of his death, and that Lynn had died in his sleep. Contrary to other reports that Lynn was found naked, Paul was in his pajamas and wearing a robe. The coroner ruled that death was caused by a heart attack. He was cremated and interred at the M&T Cemetery in M&T, Knox County, Ohio, next to those of his brother Johnny and his sister Helen. His mother, father, and veteran brother Cordon are also buried in the same cemetery. Okay. 2 years later, in 1983, NBC decided to revive the Hollywood Squares. They tried an experiment. Match Game had just been canceled, which had spent 6 years at CBS and 3 years in syndication, had just been canceled around the same time, shortly after Hollywood Squares got the boot. So NBC decided to combine the both of them into a 1-hour program. Gene Rayburn, who had hosted two versions of the Match Game in the previous 20 years, was invited back to host the Match Game portion. But when it came to the Hollywood Squares, Peter Marshall was unfortunately turned down for a young singer named John Bauman, famous for the band Sha Na Na. Yeah. Okay. And then famous for the band Sha Na Na. Okay. So basically, you at the beginning of the show, you had five celebrities were introduced. Then you had Gene and John that both were introduced. John Bauman took the 6th seat, while Gene Rayburn hosted the Match Game portion with 2 new contestants that were brand new and had never played the game before. And basically, they played 3 rounds of Match Game, and the contestant who matched the most celebrities out of 6 after the 3rd round won that game and got to go to the Hollywood Squares portion. They introduced 3 more celebrities so they could play the 9 squares of Hollywood Squares. Gene and John both swapped places. Gene Rayburn took the lower left-hand corner of the Hollywood Squares, while John Bauman hosted the show. There was no secret square, there was no permanent center square or secret square for this version, and instead you got $25 for each square that you landed, and if you got the tic-tac-toe, it was $100 for the first game, $200 for the next game, and vice versa. You played as many games as time permitted, and whoever had the highest score when time ran out, they won the game and got to go to the base. The winner of the Match Game portion, they played the defending champion from the previous show. I forgot to mention that. Okay, so whichever contestant had the highest score in the Hollywood Squares portion when time ran out, they won the game and got to play the super match. Okay, same bonus round as the regular match game. Instead, the dollar values for the three most popular answers: $1,000 for the most popular, $500 for the second most popular, and $250 for the third most popular. Three out of the nine celebrities were allowed to participate. You picked them out, and then you could go with one of their answers, or you can go on your own. And whichever one you matched, if your answer matched one of the top three, you won whatever cash was in that slot. And then you got to play the final match, where you got to multiply your winnings by up to 30. You picked one celebrity to go head to head with, and inside of each, and right next to them, each of them had a card or a number, and whichever number was behind that, what was at their side, that's how much money you multiplied your super match winnings with, and that's how much your final match was worth. And then afterwards, you got to come back on the next show to play Hollywood Squares against the match game champion of the next show. Okay, that version only lasted for about a year, and it was the least most popular version of Hollywood Squares. And after watching, it was an interesting experiment, but it basically would have been more. I begin to wonder if that show would have had better success, or if it would have lasted a little longer had Peter Marshall been the host of the Hollywood Squares. Okay, and that's all I'm going to say about that. Okay. After the match game Hollywood Squares era came to an end, that version remained in the vaults for about 35 years. Gene Rayburn was so humiliated with it that he basically vowed not to. He did not want that version resurrecting on television ever again. Thankfully, cross-ownership issues between Goodson and Orion. Orion at the time owned the Hollywood Squares portion, which eventually went over to MGM once Orion folded. It took until 2019 for Match Game Hollywood Squares Hour to show up again on television, and it's been airing on and off on the Buzzer Network. Okay, 2 years after the Match Game Hollywood Squares Hour came to an end, Hollywood Squares was resurrected in 1986 with a new host, John Davidson, who had been a regular panelist on the Peter Marshall version, so at least he knew how to play the game. John Davidson didn't want to take it at first. He wound up calling Peter Marshall, saying, They want me to host a new version of the Hollywood Squares. And Peter said, take it. They need a new face. You have what it takes. Take the offer. John Davidson eventually accepted on Peter Marshall's blessing. Peter Marshall accepted by this point that they needed a new face in order to make it successful. And John Davidson, being a regular panelist on his old show, one of his most popular moments on the Peter Marshall version for John Davidson: Japanese brides used to shave something off at the time of their marriage. What? Oh, it must be hair on some part of the body. I wonder where it could be. On the whole, I would say, right in the middle of this, people thought the hair on your asshole. The correct answer was eyebrows, of course, but he got caught. He got caught saying something that they wanted him to say that was not appropriate. Okay, and I can tell you right now, another thing I'll say about the Peter Marshall Hollywood Squares: they got away with so much stuff you couldn't even get away with today. Same with Match Game, the 70s version Match Game. Okay. Paul Lynde, when he was alive and he was doing Hollywood Squares, he made frequent appearances on Johnny Carson. And one of the things that Paul Lynde talked about Johnny Carson was how many things that Hollywood Squares was allowed to get away with that even Johnny Carson wasn't allowed to get away with. And Johnny Carson was the highest rate. Johnny Carson was in late night when when all the kids were supposed to be in bed, and he was the highest rated program on television. And at one point, Johnny Carson was the one who was literally keeping NBC alive. That probably explains why Johnny Carson wasn't allowed to get as edgy as the Hollywood Squares, because they were afraid that that Johnny would say something that would offend viewers and it would pull people away. That's how valuable the Tonight Show was to NBC. They were going to do anything. They were so protective. They were going to do anything they can to keep it at number one and to keep viewers from turning away. That probably explains why Hollywood Squares was allowed to get away with so much shit that Johnny Carson wasn't allowed to. Even though some of Johnny's stuff was pretty edgy. Rosemary's Baby Eats a Pamper. Oh, God almighty. That was one of Johnny Carson's jokes, by the way. So anyway, John Davidson, he hosted his version of Hollywood Squares for about 3 years, from 1986 to 1989. I can't really say much about this version because I never got a chance to see it. I was born around the same time the show first hit the air, and I was still in diapers when the show left the air. And even though the show reran on the USA Network for a few years afterwards, it basically, I'm still, I never had a chance to see it, and and I honestly do not remember anything about it. Okay, but I'll tell you a few things that from a few clips that I have seen. There's a few things I can share with you about it. So basically, it had a updated it had an updated version. You had they brought back the Secret Square. Each game was worth $500. Okay, each tic-tac-toe was worth $500 originally, and then as the show moved forward, or in later parts of the show's run, first two games were worth $500, and then they increased to $1,000 for each other game after that. It was an effort to try to help contestants that were trailing to catch up and eventually either tie or take the lead. Okay. Shadoe Stevens was the show's announcer for the John Davidson version. He also had a permanent square in the bottom portion of the thing. Studio audience, okay, this set was probably crammed in. Studio audience was all the way across the set, all right? And it showed right, when you showed the full 9 squares for the Hollywood Squares, you can see part of the audience in the thing there, because in order for the audience to be able to see the cars that were there for the bonus round. Okay? So basically, whichever contestant had the higher score, you were given a car key. You got to take that key to one of the cars and see if it worked. And if it worked, you were tired. And if not, you got to come back on the next show and try again. Originally, you were allowed up to 5. There was a 5-game limit, and then eventually the 5-game limit went away. You stayed in the show until you lost or until you won a car. Once you won a car, you were forced to retire. Okay? But if it took you 10 times, you got to stay in the show the whole 10 times. Okay? So that's basically what I remember. And then they also brought back the Center Square. In 1987, they hired Joan Rivers to be the Center Square. And Joan Rivers was more than happy to take the gig for a couple of reasons. First of all, she had been a regular panelist on the Peter Marshall version, so she knew how the game was played. Plus, it came at a time where she was desperate for work. She had been a permanent guest host on Johnny Carson Tonight Show during the mid '80s, and then she got picked up and then Fox came after her, wanting her to host a late night show on Fox in direct competition with Johnny Carson, and her contract was not being picked up by NBC, and she did not know what to do. With NBC not coming up to her for a renewal, she felt like she was being dropped, so she took the offer with Fox. And when she went to go talk to Johnny about it, Johnny slammed the phone right in her face and never spoke to her for the rest of his life. And Joan Rivers also received a lifetime ban from the Tonight Show in the process. Okay, the show wound up failing. They failed to get the ratings. Despite the fact that Fox was only on a handful of networks throughout the country, or in a handful of markets, they were not picking up the ratings were not that good, or they were not as high as they were expecting. They were not picking up the A-star celebrities, and rumor has it that a lot of people were scared to hop on the Joan Rivers show because Johnny Carson imitated him, saying, "You go on her show, forget about coming back on mine." Okay, he was set to make Joan fail, just like he did with anybody else who dared to compete against him. Okay, and then Joan was given a choice. Okay, fire your husband, or I'm canceling your show. She refused to cancel. She refused to fire him, so she got canceled. And as a direct result of this cancellation, it hit her and her husband so bad. And actually, right before she wound up taking the job on the Hollywood Squares, her husband committed suicide. Such a shame. Okay. And all this time, Joan Rivers never said she never had anything bad to say about Johnny Carson. She kept saying like, why were you so mad at me? I did what I had to do. Okay. Rumor has it that Johnny Carson he wanted her blessing before. Okay, he wanted to have her blessing before she moved forward with it. It's a very complicated story that we're not going to discuss, but Joan Rivers fit in perfectly with the show. Okay, and the one clip that I have seen from one of the clips I have seen from the Davidson Hollywood Squares. Joan, you're watching balls go back and forth at speeds of up to 160 miles an hour. In what sport? John, jogging. Okay, so you had Jim J. Bullock, you had Alf, you had Florence Henderson, and Robert Reed that appeared on one show. Louis Anderson apparently was on there too. I can't think of anybody. There's a lot of other people that have probably appeared that I can't even think of. But that show only lasted 3 years. Joan Rivers blamed that cancellation on the changing trend of television. All these daytime networks, okay, daytime network television, they were purging pretty much all of their game shows. Syndication, okay, all the syndicated game shows were falling apart especially after Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy took over in '83 and '84 and drove all their competition directly into the ground. That's how Family Feud and The Joker's Wild and Tic Tac Toe. That's how all those shows got the purge. And I would not be surprised if Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy did the same thing to the Hollywood Squares. Yeah. In fact, by 1994, there are only like 3 game shows left on television. Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy, both in syndication, and The Price is Right in CBS daytime. Now, of course, The Price is Right was the only game show remain on daytime network television by that point, because it was pretty much the highest rated program on all of daytime television, if not one of the highest. God forbid you try to touch something like that. Okay? If they were not delivering those kind of ratings, I can guarantee you that they would have gone after The Price is Right. Okay? Because it was hitting milestone after milestone after milestone. They were tuning in for Bob Barker. They were tuning in for the Barker's Beauties. They were tuning in for that classic game show environment that remained on the show until Bob Barker retired in 2007. And then Drew Carey took over. The show got a facelift. All right, and people kept watching because it was an institution. God forbid you try to take that show off the air. It's currently in its 51st, going into its 52nd season in a little bit. Yeah. So, 1991, Hollywood Squares gets bought up by Keen World. They want to air a syndicated version, but unfortunately, there's legal loopholes that are having to sit through. They've been having to do some legal loopholes that wind up circling for 7 years, and a lot of it had to do with the fact that Merv Griffin had a contract where no other game show produced by Keen World or distributed by Keen World was allowed to be in direct head-to-head competition with no other game show was allowed to be in direct head-to-head competition with Wheel of Fortune or Jeopardy. In fact, Merv Griffin, when he set up these two shows for syndication in the mid 80s. He made it perfectly clear. He set it up to where these two have to air, or pretty much air back to back on the same station, as a way to try to avoid the head-to-head competition. Okay. Several the loopholes finally got they found some kind of loophole by 1997 that finally got the Hollywood Squares back on the air, and they decided to go all in. You had a wide variety of A-star lists. Like for host, they hired Tom Bergeron, who at the time his only hosting experience was a morning talk show on Fox News called Fox After Breakfast. Okay, so this was his first game show experience. But then you had Whoopi Goldberg was the big star they brought in for the center square, and they brought in a whole bunch of other stars. They brought in Shale Stevens. Was not a regular square anymore. He was just the show's announcer. You had Bruce Valanche, you had Jason Alexander, you had Kathy Griffin, you had Gilbert Gottfried, a wide variety of other people too. Like that wind up. Martin Mull was also brought in too. A whole bunch of wide variety of stars that were brought in, and they were with the amount of money they were spending on this show, they were expecting high ratings. They were expected to be in the top tier of syndication ratings each and every week. And when the show first hit the air, the ratings were so high, the show got picked up through 2004, and that's a decision that Teen World pretty much regrets, because it wasn't long before the ratings started to plummet, started to drop. Okay, you were going up as you entered the new millennium. You were going up against Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. First came into the circuit, and then followed by The Weakest Link, and all these other huge dollar quiz shows people were watching instead of the Hollywood Squares. And you add that to all these raunchy reality shows. Okay, Survivor was the first one. Big Brother was next, and then you had all these. Everybody else followed suit when they found out that these shows the ratings that these kind of shows were bringing in. The networks were going all crazy for these, because you did not have to pay any writers. Just the interact. You just bring in a few random people, and they just do whatever they want, and there's your program. Very low cost, very high ratings, develops huge success. These are the type of shows that they're watching. The ratings start to drop, and by 2002, Whoopi Goldberg decides to walk away. Teen World dismisses the show's producers, and they decide to do a complete overhaul of the program. Henry Winkler is brought from, who is mostly famous for playing the Fonz on Happy Days. He had turned into a director-producer. He was brought in to be the new executive producer of the Hollywood Squares. They also did not they did not have like a permanent center square or anything like that. They decided to do a rotation. Alec Baldwin, Martin Mull, and Ellen DeGeneres were amongst the three permanent revolving center squares that they had hired. Okay. One of the most interesting ones of that one was basically Triumph the Incel Comic Dog. In the early part of the Bergeron version, "Hi Bergeron, thank you so much for letting me sit next to the beautiful Kathy Lee. Hey Kathy Lee, you know Regis and I have a lot in common. We both broke up with our bitches this year." And then they basically had Kathy Lee Gifford went straight over to Triumph and gave him a spanking. "I love you. You're only encouraging me, baby." That's sick. And then right after the show got a new overhaul, Triumph had these comments to make. "Oh, Bergeron, I love this. It's all new. It's a new set, a new logo. You got a brand new bitch in the center square." Ellen DeGeneres. "And I've got one question for you. Why the hell are you still here? Whose leg did you hump to keep this job?" A brand new format too. Okay, so in the, When Tom Bergeron's Hollywood Squares first launched, and basically this took place throughout most of the show's run, first game was worth $1,000. Second game was $2,000. Then it was $3,000, vice versa. You played the secret square game in the second game, and if you land on that, you won the prize, and then that was non-adjacent to the rest of the show. And then whoever had the highest score at the end of the game, they got to go to the bonus round, where they got to play for one of 9 prizes, and you were allowed to come back on the show up to 5 times. And you picked a celebrity. Inside the envelope was a prize, and the celebrity was read one question, usually multiple choice. And if the contestant correctly agreed or disagreed with the celebrity, they won the prize. And if not, no big deal. You get to come back on the next show. Okay. You were allowed up to 5 appearances on the show. Okay. During Whoopi Goldberg's final season on the show, they developed a new version of the bonus round. Whoopi Goldberg had worked on it for quite a while. So basically, you pick a celebrity. Inside is a cash value, is a different cash amount. Tom Bergeron speeds through a whole bunch of questions. You get the contestant and the celebrity get to work together. You can have help from the celebrity if you want for the answers, but the answer has to come from the contestant in order for that money to count. You get that X amount of money for if you had like $2,000 in the envelope, $2,000 for each correct answer. They went through as many questions as time permitted within 60 seconds. And once you had 6 seconds ended, you pretty much had won that amount of money. Then you had the choice to go double or nothing on one final question. If you went for it and missed, you lost all your bonus winnings, or you could stop right there and walk away with your bonus winnings in home. Okay, that unfortunately did not work out. And then, of course, once they got the new overhaul, once the Fonz took over, okay, you basically you had like 30 seconds. You went through each celebrity one by one. You had about 30 seconds to go through as many celebrities as possible. Tom Bergeron read you had a true or false question about that particular star. If you correctly agreed or disagreed with that statement, you got the square. And basically, each star that you correctly agreed or disagreed with, it basically took one bad key away. Usually it was for a car or for cash or a trip or something like that. You basically it took away one bad key, and amongst the keys that were left over, you picked one of the keys, and you got to go to the car. And if it started, you won the car. If not, you got to come back on the next show. Okay, that's pretty much how that's how the Bergeron version worked. And then in the final season of the Bergeron version, oh my God, that was pretty bad. Final season changes. So for the 6th and last season of Hollywood Squares, more changes were made to the series. John Moschita Jr. replaced Jeffrey Tambor as the announcer. Bruce Vilanch returned to the series as an occasional panelist. The game format was scrapped in favor of returning to the best 2 out of 3 format last seen on the daytime NBC version. Each game was worth $1,000, and the first player to win the necessary 2 games won the match. The secret square was still played during the second game, but the accumulating jackpot of prizes was discarded in favor of playing for 1 prize per match, regardless of whether or not the previous match's prize was won. The format change resulted in the show no longer being self-contained. Matches could and often did straddle in between episodes. Bonus round format from the previous season remained, but with several changes. All 9 keys were in play each time a contestant played the bonus round, regardless of whether he or she had won the prize the previous round or not. Each correct answer in the first half of the round was now worth $500 if the prize was not won. The prize structure also changed. Okay. First win was a vacation worth about $10,000. Second win was worth $10,000 cash. Third win was a luxury car valued about $40,000. Fourth win was $25,000 cash. And the fifth win was a trip around the world. Season 6 theme weeks used the game format from the first 5 seasons, with each match played from time to time in the bonus round serving as the final segment. The winners of these matches played the bonus round for $10,000 cash or a car, and had one key eliminated at the outside before eliminating any additional keys. Okay. Oh, you also Simon Cowell is what they said too. But all right. Around Peter Marshall had said that the Whoopi Goldberg version, or the Whoopi Goldberg era, Marshall was not too fond of, but he was fond of the later portion of that run. After Goldberg had left and the show was reformatted, he was very fond of that. And around in the 2002-2003 season, Henry Winkler decided to do a game show themes week, in which they brought back a whole bunch of legendary game show legends. Okay, they brought Peter Marshall back as the center square for that particular week. Other game show legends they included, but not limited to, Chuck Woolery for Love Connection, Jim Lane for the dating game, Bob Eubanks from the Newlywed Game, Charles Nelson Riley and Brett Summers, who both shared a square. They were from Match Game, of course. You had Wink Martindale. And I think you had a couple. I would not be surprised if Betty White was on there too. Okay. They had Peter Marshall as the center square, and because Whoopi Goldberg was no longer on the show, it basically inspired him to agree on the invitation. Okay. And then during that last episode of the game show week, Peter Marshall was invited to be in the hosting seat. Tom Bergeron and Peter Marshall switched places. Bergeron was the center square while Peter Marshall hosted. And it brought back so many memories for him, and he would never forget. And he was so grateful to have that honor too. Okay. So after 2004, the show was canceled in 2004. Martin Mull was the permanent center square for the final season, of course. Let's see. After that came to an end, MTV2, they did something called Hip Hop Squares in 2012, as well as the late 2010s from 2017 to 2019. They had the West Virginia Squares that aired on local station WPVB in 2014. Nashville Squares in 2019 with Bob Saget as the host. You also had the Hollywood Museum Squares in 2021, in which each episode was introduced by Peter Marshall himself, announced by Shadoe Stevens and John Harvey. Okay. Davidson, Bergeron, Valanche, Finn, and Mark Summers each hosted one episode. Okay. There is going to be on May 2nd, 2024, CBS has announced that they have greenlit a new version of the show that will premiere in January 2025 with Drew Barrymore as the center square. As of June 11th, Deadline has reported that Nate Burleson will host the show, who is a Canadian-born American television host, football commentator, and former NFL player. So let's see. Went to college in Nevada, played NFL football for the Vikings, Seahawks, Lions, and Browns between 2003 and 2014. Okay. It's going to be interesting to see how that turns out. Not sure whether or not this is going to be on CBS daytime or if it's going to be on CBS primetime. But I guarantee you, they're going to spend, just like the Bergeron version, they're going to spend an arm and a leg on this version for sure. And as for Tom Bergeron, I'm pretty sure he's pretty thankful that he got a chance to host the Hollywood Squares, because it landed other huge projects for him, including America's Funniest Home Videos and Dancing with the Stars, both of which were highly rated TV shows over on ABC. So without the Hollywood Squares, you wouldn't have seen Bergeron become a household name over the ABC network. Okay. So let's see. What else? So episode status. Okay. So those of you who are wondering about what has happened, okay, whether or not they're in reruns, okay. As for the original version of the original Peter Marshall version, until 2002, nearly all the episodes were believed to have been lost or destroyed. However, in 2002, there was a rumor where a representative from Sci-Fi was over at NBC requesting tapes of the TV show Dark Shadows. They were interested in rerunning on the Sci-Fi network. While they were going through the vaults looking for Dark Shadows episodes, they came across they came across a whole bunch of master recordings from the original Peter Marshall Hollywood Squares. And once word got out, the Game Show Network was interested in rerunning the show. In April of 2002, 130 episodes of the Peter Marshall Hollywood Squares, mainly for the 1968 primetime version, as well as the 70s syndication run, were rerun on the network. And it pretty much remained as a constant member of the network throughout the rest of the 2000s. The Game Show Network no longer has the rights to the Peter Marshall Hollywood Squares. Those have been transitioned back to Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, who is the current ownership rights holder to the Hollywood Squares. Okay. Nobody seems to know exactly how many episodes that the original Hollywood Squares still exist today. Okay. There's rumors that many of the Hollywood Squares episodes were destroyed in correspondence to network policy at the time. In 1995, when Peter Marshall appeared on the Donahue Show, Donahue mentioned something about your guys' faces are to be found on somebody's television around the world. And Peter Marshall broke the news and says, you won't see my face. They destroyed all the Hollywood Squares tapes, all 6,000 of them. Why? Stupidity, I guess, I suppose. But they're all gone. There's a few clips here and there, but that's it. Okay? And this was back in 1995. And then in 2002, they came across a bunch of episodes. We don't know exactly how much there are. One source says the whole show's run still exists, but that's an unverified answer, so I can't really tell you if that's true or not. There's other sources that say a whole bunch of them are still in existence, but for one reason or another, whether the tapes are non-compatible with today's tape players or political correctness issues or even copyright issues with the estates of deceased celebrities. Okay? Many of these factors, okay, are most likely keeping the Peter Marshall Hollywood Squares from resurfacing on television anytime soon. But there are episodes that are still in existence. It's just a question whether or not the show will make a return to television or not. Okay? Match Game Hollywood Squares Hour airs entirely in existence. That entirely survives in its entirety and has been rerunning on the Buzzard Network for the last 5 years. John Davidson's Hollywood Squares reran on the USA Network during the early 90s. It has not resurfaced since. Tom Bergeron's version has rerun on the Game Show Network constantly. It has not been currently, let's see. 1998 syndicated series has been rerun on the Game Show Network in the past, and every season except for one, which includes the final season, has been carried by the network over the years. Episodes were also rerun on Game TV in Canada. In July of 2023, a Hollywood Squares channel was added to Pluto TV, featuring episodes from the final 2 Bergeron seasons. Not sure whether or not that still exists. But it says here on Wikipedia, okay, about another thing about Peter Marshall's Hollywood Squares. At least 13 episodes from the 1968 NBC daytime run are known to have been part of that 130 episode game show package for the Game Show Network. It was noted at the time that substantially more Marshall episodes than the 130 that GSN aired are believed to exist, but for a number of reasons, including political correctness concerns and personality rights clearance issues, have never been rerun. The UCLA has a handful of NBC daytime episodes in their film and television archive. Okay, so June 25th, 1993 is the last time the John Davidson version has been shown on television. There's a few episodes circulating across YouTube, in case those of you are wondering what to pick up from that. Okay. Let's see. A few other facts about Peter Marshall. So let's take a look. So Peter Marshall had in addition to his theater work, he also has 4 children and 2 stepchildren he had been married 3 times. His third wife, Laurie Stewart, they married on August 19th, 1989. A total of 4 children and 2 stepchildren from previous marriages. He has a son, Pete, Ralph Pierre Pete Lecoq Jr. He's a former Major League Baseball player, a retired first baseman who spent 9 years playing for the Chicago Cubs and the Kansas City Royals. Okay. Peter Marshall was diagnosed with COVID-19 in January 2021, discharged from the hospital in February in what was considered a hospice situation. He survived the virus at home with a new doctor and 24-hour nursing care. Marshall's 68-year-old son, David Lecoq, he wound up dying in August of 2021 from COVID while in Hawaii. Peter Marshall died of kidney failure at his home in Encino, Los Angeles, California, on August 15, 2024, at the age of 98. Peter Marshall did a YouTube live birthday celebration back in March. They wound up sharing rare clips of the Hollywood Squares for his birthday celebration. He looked like a healthy person back then. But as clearly evident, okay, as we have clearly seen with old people, I've personally experienced this myself. I have a grandmother who died back in January of 2024 at the age of 97, around the same age Peter Marshall was. All right. One day she was nice and healthy. The next day, she's on her deathbed. And a few days after that, she's gone. Okay? It just goes to show you how quickly things can happen to somebody at an older age, like Peter Marshall or my grandmother. And who knows what's going to happen with Jimmy Carter. But especially after his wife's passing last fall. But that'll be a discussion for another day. Okay? Other things we can talk about regarding Peter Marshall. He was on the Love Boat. Let's see. Other work that he has done. So other than game shows and comedy and stuff. You have... he did 15 years on the Music of Your Life radio network. Co-sang with Debbie Boone on... Peter Marshall wound up doing an infomercial with Debbie Boone in an infomercial for Time Life called The Music of Your Life Collection. Features songs from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Infomercial was released in 2016 after selling more than a few CDs a few years prior. Marshall wound up singing the song Back Home Again in Indiana at the Indianapolis 500 in 1979. He was also, that same year, he had a guest star on The Love Boat as Dr. Todd Gardner, who was the author of a bestseller. Okay? In 1982, he had a small role in the film adaptation of Annie as radio announcer Bert Healy. Okay? He, those of you who remember watching Annie, you see like you're in the radio station, and the guy who's singing before introducing Mr. Warbucks and stuff. That was Peter Marshall himself. In 2002, Marshall published a book about his experience backstage with the original Hollywood Square. In 2009, he appeared on television promoting compact disc hits from the Big Band era. Also hosted a 2-hour PBS special, The Big Band Years. In 2010, Marshall, along with Monty Hall and Wade Martindale, appeared with their wives on a special game show legend version of the Newlywed Game. The special was hosted by Bob Eubanks, in which the Martindales won the game. Okay. Another thing they did not mention here, in 2002, NBC came out with a couple of TV specials called The Most Outrageous Game Show Moments. They had 5 specials overall. The first one came out by itself in 2002, and the other 4 came out in 2003. Each one, okay, 2 of them, second and third one came out back to back in early 2003, while the other 2 came out back to back in the summer. Okay, the first one was hosted by 5 game show legends: Bob Eubanks from the Newlywed Game, Jim Lane from the Dating Game, Peter Marshall from the Hollywood Squares, Wade Martindale from Tic Tac Toe, and Ben Stein from Win Ben Stein's Money. Okay, that's where most of Peter Marshall's Hollywood Squares clips they were shown in all 5 specials. Many of them were shown in the first one, although a couple of them wind up resurrecting in the later parts of the shows, in the later parts of those networks, the specials run, so to speak. You have basically you have let's see. Second and third specials were hosted by Bob Eubanks by themselves, while the last 2 were hosted by both Bob Eubanks and Chuck Woolery. Okay. Let's see. After his COVID scare in 2021, he officially retired from the entertainment industry. He kept up he has a Facebook page that's currently still being used, even after his passing. Okay. So Peter Marshall. So we're about pretty much out of time here. So let me go ahead and give you my stance on this. Peter Marshall was a great legend, somebody that will be irreplaceable. He has the honors of being affiliated with a single. Okay, you have many people out there. You have a handful of people out there that are, or a handful of shows that are affiliated with one particular individual. Examples: The Price is Right. Even though it was originally hosted by Bill Cullen, it will always be affiliated with Bob Barker. Wheel of Fortune is Pat Sajak's staple show. Newlywed Game is always going to be affiliated with Bob Eubanks. Dating Game with Jim Lane. Tic Tac Toe with Wade Martindale. Let's see, other shows you have. Name That Tune with Tom Kennedy. Password will always be affiliated with Alan Ludden. Match Game will always be affiliated with Gene Rayburn. And then, of course, there is the Hollywood Squares, which will always be affiliated with Peter Marshall. Over the past several decades, even after the show's run has come off the air, Peter Marshall and many of the other legends who have appeared on the Hollywood Squares have been able to share all their experiences on the show. They've been able to share like some of their greatest moments, some of the craziest moments, their experiences with other people in the show. And many of the panelists and stuff had passed away over the years. But in the long run, Peter Marshall was the one person who pretty much lasted the longest. And even though it was great hearing him after all the times, his time, unfortunately, has expired. And with that, the Hollywood Squares is nothing more today than just a memory. find the experiences now only on television and in books and in interviews. As the classic Hollywood Squares is now nothing, even though it is gone, it is not forgotten. That's all the time Mr. Wildcat has for today's review, or today's tribute to Peter Marshall. We will be doing another tribute shortly down the road for legendary talk show host Phil Donahue, who just passed away who just passed away just the other day. And he is a very important individual that you basically have to tribute. If you guys have seen any talk shows on television, you owe a huge debt gratitude to Phil Donahue. And we will talk about that in his tribute down the road. Till the next time we meet, Mr. Wildcat is here reminding you all to be good, be careful, and behave.